My name is Eric, and I'm 37 years old. Until a few months ago, I thought I understood what boundaries were. I work as a project manager for a medium-sized construction company, and in my spare time, I enjoy tinkering in the garage, doing modest carpentry projects like making shelves and refurbishing antique tools. The garage has always served as my shelter. It's where I went after a long, exhausting day when I needed some calm and therapy. But it did not evaporate all at once. It was chipped away gradually and silently, until one morning I found myself staring at a padlock on my own garage door. And that's when things changed. It all began simply enough. My wife, Jess, was always close to her family, including her parents, Frank and Marlene, and her younger brother, Troy. They live around 20 minutes away, in a crowded 2-bedroom townhouse. They're not necessarily horrible people, just chaotic and disorganized. People who can't throw away a broken chair because someone might fix it someday, but never them. When they contacted one weekend to see if we had any spare space in our garage for some boxes, I didn't think much of it. At first, there were only a few boxes, 2 cardboard containers labeled Christmas and books. I stashed them in a back corner, beneath my workbench, hoping they'd retrieve them when they needed their decorations or had time to sort them out. But then the number of visits increased. Every several weeks, Frank would stop over with one more thing, typically dragging a reluctant Troy along with him. It wasn't long until chairs, luggage, some old gym equipment, and what appeared to be bits of a disassembled futon joined the crates. My workstation got more difficult to reach. My floor space shrank. I had to continuously rearrange stuff just to get to my drill press. Initially, I brought it up lightly with Jess. "Hey, your parents are kind of taking over the garage," I mentioned one evening as we were cleaning up after dinner. She waved it away with a tired smile. "They're merely storing a few items, Eric. It doesn't last forever. Be patient, okay?" I attempted to be. I actually did. However, patience has a limited shelf life, particularly when your garage begins to resemble a second-hand furniture warehouse. After a few weeks, I arrived home one night to find Frank and Marlene in the garage, looking through my drawers. Frank was clutching one of my wrenches, peering as if unsure whether it was his or mine. "Hello," I said, not rudely, but not softly. "What are you looking for?" "Oh," Marlene explained, "we were just looking for a screwdriver." Troy assumed he had left one here. "Troy, why did you leave a screwdriver in my garage?" I inquired, not quite joking. Frank chuckled. "Well, we've been using this space a lot lately. It's sort of like a communal garage, right?" I did not laugh. I did not even blink. I simply gazed at them until they clumsily shuffled away. That night, I informed Jess unequivocally, "Your parents need to relocate their belongings. This is not working. I can't even use my tools without falling over their mess." She sighed, as if I were the unreasonable one. "It is not rubbish. They don't have any space, Eric. Come on, it's only the garage. Why are you so territorial about it?" That struck a nerve. I do not ask for much. I don't care if her mother rearranges our living room every Christmas, or if Troy comes over and eats all of our cereal. But the garage was mine. My own tiny bubble. But rather than argue, I let it go. For the moment. A few days later, I discovered something weird. One of my tool cabinets had shifted. Not barely shifted, but entirely relocated to make way for a massive plastic storage unit stuffed with who knows what. I opened a few bins out of curiosity, including extension cords, tangled holiday lights, a waffle maker, and, strangely, a shoebox filled with ancient VHS cassettes. The situation was chaotic. I went inside and asked Jess what had occurred. She scarcely glanced up from her phone. "Yes," she said. "Mom stopped by earlier. She needed additional space and decided it would be best to organize things on shelves. Isn't it more efficient?" "Efficient. Right. For the maybe." I was outraged, but I kept it inside. Rather than blowing up, I began moving my tools into the basement, cutting out whatever space I could between the water heater and the washing machine. It wasn't perfect, but I was tired of fighting. At least that is what I told myself. Until the padlock. It was Saturday morning when I discovered it. I just returned from a hardware shop run, coffee in hand, ready to finally fix the broken hinge on our side gate. However, as I walked up to the garage, My key did not work. I frowned and tried again. That's when I spotted the gleaming new padlock, hefty and heavy-duty, with a sheen as if it had just been put that morning. I stood there in shock, grasping the handle as if, just maybe, if I pushed hard enough, reality would bend to my will. I stormed in. Jess was in the kitchen, humming and preparing a smoothie. "Jess," I murmured, trying to keep my voice steady. "Why is there a padlock on the garage?" She did not turn around. "Oh, that. Dad put it on. He stated that they did not want anything disturbed because it is basically their property now." I blinked. "What about their stuff? What about their garage?" She shrugged, as if it were the most common thing in the world. "You haven't used it much lately, Eric. You have your tools downstairs now. They just needed a safe location for everything. You understand, correct?" No, I did not comprehend. Not a bit. My heart was racing in my chest, a mix of rage, betrayal, and something deeper that I couldn't even identify. I strolled down the hall, opened the closet, and grabbed my toolbox. I didn't say anything. Not after Jess inquired where I was heading. Not when she murmured something about how dramatic I am. I just strolled outside, stared at the padlock once more, and began unscrewing the hinges. I did not break it. I did not need to. I had enough tools to get around a foolish lock. Within minutes, I had opened the door and stood in the garage, surrounded by everything that had gradually replaced me. Every shelf, bin, and dusty old chair seemed like a punch to the face. Contaminated. Wrong. Jess came outdoors around 3:45 p.m. Her eyes expanded. "Eric, what are you doing?" I did not stop packing. "Reclaiming my garage," I murmured gently. She walked over, her voice raised. "You can't just throw their belongings away." "I'm not tossing anything away," I explained quietly. "It is on the curb. They can pick it up at any moment." She looked at me as if I had grown a second head. "You are being unreasonable." I turned to face her completely. "No, Jessica. What's ridiculous is that I'm locked out of my own space because your family cannot hire a storage unit like normal folks." Before she could respond, my phone exploded. It was Frank. Then Marlene. Then Troy. I didn't respond. I just continued working. By sunset, everything was out. Every box, bin, and bag. And what I did next, well, let's just say Frank turned pale when he came. Frank arrived about 6:15 p.m. in his beat-up Ford Explorer, his tires squealing slightly from braking too hard in front of our driveway. Marlene sat in the passenger seat, already gazing at me as if I had set fire to their house instead of simply leaving some clutter on the curb. Jess was trailing behind them, her arms crossed and her face stiff with that half-pained, half-disbelieving expression I'd grown to recognize over the last year. Frank walked out as if he were attacking a war. "What exactly is going on here?" he barked, nodding toward the rows of plastic bins and waste bags that had formed a line along the curb, like troops awaiting inspection. I took a deep, calm breath. Then I made my decision. By lunchtime, I had emptied 1/3 of the garage. I carefully and deliberately placed everything on the curb, wrapping everything in plastic if it appeared fragile, and stacking it so it wouldn't fall. I was not doing this out of rage. I was doing this as if I were handling a biohazard, because that's how it felt. Why are our belongings out here? I didn't even pause as I taped a last label to a package of tangled Christmas lights. Because it does not belong in my garage. He looked at me as if I had just spoken in another language. He fixed our garage. I eventually turned to face him. "No, Frank. My garage. I am the one who pays for this house. The mortgage. Property taxes. The maintenance. You have been squatting in my workstation for 6 months. You crossed the line." Marlene scoffed from behind him, her arms flapping slightly as she moved forward. "Squatting? Oh, please, Eric. We sought for permission." "Yes, for the 2 boxes." I shot back. 2 crates. That somehow turned into 20 bins, a treadmill, a full shelf unit, and a padlock on my door. "You did not ask for that." Frank's face turned scarlet, and veins rose slightly on his temple. "You are being petty. It was a storage favor. Families support one another out. And I did help," I said. 4 months. However, Aiding you does not imply giving up ownership. That is not family. That is exploitation. Jess was standing behind him now, silent, but I could tell she was watching everything. She hadn't said anything since I began emptying the garage. Her attitude was not enraged, but rather stunned, perhaps even humiliated. She had not expected me to follow through on it. Troy finally arrived about 6.30 in his tiny Hyundai, slamming the door shut and striding over with his typical smug look. "Wow," he said, shaking his head. "You're truly losing it, right?" I looked at him and then pointed to the sidewalk. "The items are arranged by owner. Your bins are at the far end. Are you serious now?" He laughed, smirking as if this were a petty trick. "You are kicking us out over a garage? You've got the entire home, man. Why do you care so much?" "Because I gave an inch, and your family took the entire damn mile. You guys exceeded every limit I established. You made yourself at home in a location I had never invited you to. Then you locked me out of my own place. That's not how it works." Frank stepped closer, his posture tight. "We trusted you. We thought you were family, but you act like a stranger." I stepped forward, face to face. "No, Frank. You wanted me to remain passive, to simply roll over and accept it. And when I didn't, you pretended I was the villain." Marlene appeared to be about to explode. "We could have just discussed this. Do you mean when you changed my garage without asking?" I snapped. "Or when you told my wife that you needed your space now? Or when you put a padlock on the door like I was a trespasser within my own house?" That quieted her for a second. Frank finally ended the pause. "Eric, you're going to regret this." I smiled, but not warmly. It was the smile of someone who had finally come to the end of a long rope. "No, I already regret letting things go for so long." And then I turned away. This should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. The next morning, I got up early and stepped out to the curb to discover a few of the bins still there. The majority of the larger goods had been loaded into Frank's car following the previous night's shouting session. But 3 bins were left behind, one of which was open and clearly rummaged through. I exhaled. Of course, they had not picked up everything. Jess was silent during breakfast. She didn't touch her food or look up from her plate. I waited for her to say anything, but the stillness lasted for minutes. I finally broke it. "So, are we going to discuss what happened yesterday?" She swallowed but did not meet my gaze. "You embarrassed them." I felt something harden in my chest. I recovered my place. "They embarrassed themselves." Her voice was gentle. "You didn't inform me you were planning to do that. You didn't inform me they were installing a lock on my garage," I remarked bluntly. She eventually looked up, and the pain in her eyes almost made me hesitate. "I didn't realize they would. I figured they'd cease eventually." I stood up and poured myself another cup of coffee, having to do something with my hands. "They were not going to stop, Jess. You understand that now, don't you?" She didn't respond, and she didn't argue either. Later that day, I put all of my tools back in the garage. It seemed uncomfortable at first, like returning to a room formerly occupied by strangers. But with each shelf I reorganized and each tool I reinstalled, something settled inside me. The one that leads to the garage. When I opened it, Frank was standing there again. This time, however, he was not shouting. He seemed rattled, pale. His hands shook slightly as he held out a single piece of paper to me. I took it, scanned it. It was a receipt. For a storage unit. A very big one. He murmured, "Just wanted to let you know. I'm fixed on the floor. We won't need your garage anymore." Then, gently, he said, "You made your point." And they walked away. However, that was not the part that shook me. I noticed Marlene behind him, across the street. She stood close to a truck. Her face was crimson. Her hands are on her hips. And she was watching Jess, who was standing on our doorstep. And Jess was watching me. Because it wasn't over. Not even close. The night was calm. But not in a peaceful manner. The kind of silence in which the air seems excessively still. Like the quiet before a storm. Jess said nothing else after Frank left. She simply stood there. Arms folded over her chest. Eyes are remote. I did not press her. Not only relief. Control. As if I had reclaimed something that had been stealthily stolen from me, piece by piece. But then, one evening, something unexpected occurred. I received a knock at the door. Not the front door, but the side door. By this point, I knew she was processing. Or perhaps calculated. In any case, our silence was more powerful than any argument. I spent the remainder of the evening in the garage, gradually regaining it inch by inch. I swept the floors twice. Not because it was necessary, but the rhythm helped to quiet my thoughts. I put my toolboxes back on the shelves, reinstalled my pegboard, and even rehung the vintage Miller Lite sign I'd bought up years ago, which Jess despised and conveniently forgot to rehang after the garage was taken over. As I worked, I realized how much I'd let go of, not just the space, but also my own voice. When I eventually came inside, Jess was cuddled up on the couch, watching something on TV with the volume turned down. I sat at the opposite end. We both pretended to be engaged in the show for several minutes, but neither of us was actually watching it. She eventually remarked, "You could have told me what you were going to do." "I didn't expect you'd back me up." I responded honestly, and I needed to know that I could still stand up for myself, even if it meant doing so alone. She flinched slightly, but did not deny it. After a pause, she inquired, "Are you going to hold this against me forever?" I shake my head. "No, but I won't pretend it didn't happen." That was the end of the night. Anyway, the next morning I figured out what you were trying to say. I went out to the curb to carry in the garbage can and spotted a folded note taped to the mailbox. No envelope, just my name written in poor, all-caps handwriting. I knew it was Frank's as soon as I saw it. He writes as if he were still using a chalkboard. The note read, "I hope you're pleased. You embarrassed your own family for a garage. Your wife is upset, your in-laws are hurt, and you've made enemies out of individuals who have always tried to help you. Think about it." It was not signed, but I didn't need one. I crumpled it after only reading it once. But as I turned back to face the home, I noticed something else. The side fence gate was slightly open. I always lock it. I stepped over and noticed some faint footprints in the soil. Someone had been in our backyard. That evening, I set up a camera facing the back gate. Not because I was paranoid, but because I knew how Frank worked. He was not the type of guy to take things quietly. He simmered. He brooded. He plotted. The man reportedly nursed a 5-year grudge over a poker game where someone accused him of glancing at their cards. A few days passed without incident, but the mood within the house remained frigid. Jess was civil but distant. She prepared meals, and we made small talk, but it all felt mechanical. We both felt as if we were walking on a tightrope, terrified of falling. Then came Saturday. I was in the garage, working on refinishing a cabinet I got on Craigslist, when the entrance to the house flung wide and Jess entered, carrying her phone. "They posted about you," she stated bluntly. "Who?" "My mom. On Facebook." I washed my hands with a rag and raised an eyebrow. "What kind of post?" She handed me the phone. This was Marlene's profile. She had posted a happy stock photo of a broken family, replete with sad eyes and dramatic lighting. The caption said, "When you do everything for someone, let them marry your daughter, let them into your life, and they repay you by throwing your belongings in the street and locking you out. Some people are simply related by name and not by heart. Hashtag disrespect. Hashtag ungrateful. Hashtag family matters." The comments were far worse. One of her pals commented, "He sounds toxic. Your daughter deserves better." Another person said, "Sounds like you should move in with her and get her out of that situation." And then one particularly nosy neighbor, Linda, whom I already despised, said, "I noticed that crap on the curb. I believed someone had been evicted. I cannot believe that was your son-in-law. Shameful." I returned the phone. So that is how they are spinning it. Jess did not say anything. She simply sat down on the edge of my workbench and stroked her temples. "They're not going to quit, are they?" "Not unless you manufacture them," I softly said. "I do not want to be in the midst of this, Eric." I nodded. "I understand. However, pretending you're not in the center won't make it go away. They are currently abusing your husband online since they did not receive what they wanted. Her shoulders slumped. What do you want me to do? Tell them it isn't okay. Tell them to take down the post. Tell them you are on my side. She paused. Then, discreetly, I do not wish to take sides. And that's when I knew she'd done it already. She didn't want to speak it aloud. Later that evening, after she had gone to bed, I sat in the garage and looked at nothing for quite some time. The air smelled like sawdust and varnish, which was familiar and grounded. I kept thinking about the message Frank had written me, and how I had humiliated them. It's amusing how entitled individuals always feel aggrieved when you eventually draw the line. The following day, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, there was no one present. Only a manila envelope on the welcoming mat. Inside, something made my gut churn. Because they were no longer just being petty. They were attempting to escalate. And they had just made a huge mistake. I picked up the mail and felt a weight on my chest before even opening it. It seemed thick and heavy, as if it were warning me. This alters everything. I brought it into the garage, sat at my workstation, and opened it with the same care I'd take with a splintered board poised to snap. Inside were photocopies of receipts, phone photos, and Frank's handwritten note. These receipts were for tools. My tools. Photos revealed my workbench, drill press, and shelves, all branded in messy black Sharpie with small notes like, "Ours, family property, contributed by Frank." The letter was terrible. It said, "Eric, since you've decided to make things legal and draw lines, here's what you should know. Many of the tools and goods in that garage were paid for or co-purchased during visits throughout the previous year. We have proof of contributions and are ready to claim our part. If you do not return our stuff or reimburse us for what is missing, we will go to small claims court." This could have remained civil. Frank. I stared at the paper. The writing blurred slightly as my jaw clenched. Frank was attempting to claim ownership of my land. He was rewriting history to portray himself as the benevolent philanthropist who had furnished my garage without ever paying a dime. It was a desperate bluff. He knew he didn't have a leg to stand on, but that didn't stop him from trying to drag me through the muck. I summoned Jess into the garage. Her face became white as she examined the documents. "You're kidding," she said quietly. "I wish I was," I answered, handing her the letter. "I'm not even sure what half of this is supposed to prove." She looked at me before returning her attention to the photographs. "That is your sander. I recall you ordering it for your birthday 2 years ago." "Exactly. And my father gave me that leveler as a gift when I started my first job in construction. These are not Frank's. He's attempting to make up a story since I embarrassed him." She looked up at me slowly. "What are you planning to do?" I'll reply, but not in the way he wants. That night, I called a lawyer friend of mine, Lewis. We had previously worked together on a few site compliance issues, and I trusted him. I emailed along the photographs, receipts, and letter. He reviewed everything and got back to me within 2 hours. He said, "This isn't going anywhere. But you must create a paper trail. Respond once, clearly, and then discontinue contact. Make it airtight in case he decides to take this to court." So I wrote an email. Professional. Not emotional. "Frank, I received your mail, checked the materials, and closed. To be clear, all of the tools and goods in my garage were purchased or gifted to me, and I have receipts or witness statements to prove it. Your claims are unfounded. If you pursue legal action, I will sue for harassment, attempted fraud, and defamation. Any additional communication should go through my legal counsel. Eric." I copied Lewis on the email. Then I pressed send. The response arrived the next day. From Marlene. "You think you're so clever, hiding behind attorneys. We trusted you. We allow you to marry into our family. We treated you like a son. So this is how you repay us. You have turned Jess against us. You have poisoned her. You are wrecking everything. And now for the final line. If Jess abandons you over this, it will be your responsibility." I showed the message to Jess. She read slowly, her lips stiffening with each sentence. Then she handed the phone back and said, "Delete it." "You okay?" I asked. She nodded. "Nobody talks to my spouse like that." Not even my mother. It was the first time in weeks that I noticed fire in her eyes again. That night, Jess called her parents. She did not shout. She did not cry. She talked in the same cold, calculated tone that I used when I dumped their belongings on the curb. I saw the message, Mother. I saw the Facebook post, too. You should take it down. And you should back off. Permanently. I could only hear Jess' side of the conversation, but I could sense the storm on the other end. No, she replied. You can't turn this into Eric being the villain. You locked him out of his garage. You acted as if it were yours. You used me to accomplish it. You made him feel like a stranger in his own home. Now you're playing the victim. Her palm trembled slightly while holding the phone, but it never shattered. It's not just about the garage anymore. This is about you. About how you control others and expect them to conform to your world. Well, I'm finished. You are no longer welcome in our home. Not until you apologize. Another pause. And then no. This time, you don't get to determine when the talk ends. She hung up. That night, for the first time in weeks, Jess came out to the garage and sat with me as I worked. You were correct, she murmured gently. About everything. I said nothing at first. I just handed her a tiny box of screws that I was sorting, and we worked together in silence for a while. They've always been like that, she explained after a while. But I never realized how deep it went until today. They make you feel like you owe them for allowing you to exist in their world. Yes, I said. That is exactly it. I do not want to live in their world anymore. The consequences followed quickly after that. The Facebook post disappeared after 24 hours. I guess it wasn't by choice. Jess had responded straight to it, naming her mother and calling her out for lying. It became messy. Dozens of responses from mutual friends, some supporting, others wondering what really happened. However, it was too late to prevent more damage. Jess blocked her parents. Next, we changed the locks. Not just for the garage, for all doors. I installed cameras at the front and side entries, and we even acquired a doorbell camera. I was not taking chances. A week later, another note appeared in the mail, this time handwritten by Troy. He did not want to take sides, he said. But he believed it was strange that we'd shut off communication over minor storage space. I did not respond. Jess did not either. We were finished explaining ourselves. The garage is quiet now. Mine again. The tools are back where they belong. The floor is clean. The Miller Lite sign is crooked, but I prefer it that way. It reminds me that this is my own place, not anyone else's. Sometimes I see Jess in the expression she used to give when her relatives caused trouble. We are stronger. We have boundaries. We discovered the hard way that you cannot keep people in your life only because they share your blood, especially if they poison your peace, twist the truth, and treat you like a resource rather than a person. The people who profess they love you are not your family. It's who respects you. Finally, regaining my garage was more than simply a room. It was about recovering oneself.